Hello and welcome to episode 2 of DePIN Unplugged. And I'm joined here today with Alexandra from Staex.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting Staex today to your podcast.
Yes, great to have you here. So Super Team Germany is doing these podcasts, and our intention is to showcase really awesome projects working on DePIN in the Solana ecosystem, and get to know a little bit more about what they're doing and a little bit more about how the direction of the ecosystem is going and how people can get involved as well. So first off, just give us a little bit of an introduction on Staex and what you're doing, what you're building, and a little bit of everything.
Sure. So first and foremost, really happy to get connected to Solana Super Team. It actually, funny enough, it happened in London. So we we were invited to a conference in London, and there we connected to Solana Super Team London, and then we get connected back to Germany. So that's super exciting. And so we are Staex. We are based in Berlin. This is very important to me because I love the city, and I personally think that for me, my journey started here in 2013. So this is like the homeland of a lot of crypto protocols. So this is super exciting. And so Staex, we are building industrial protocol that helps our customers, industrial customers, usually it's mobile fleet owners like charger stations, public bus transportation, etc., to solve the problem of network. It's very hard to actually assemble a good network. There are also like all sorts of issues of network security. And the cherry on top is that we provide for them the Web3 connectivity. So this is what we're doing. And we have a unique history of coming from Deutsche Telekom. So my story, I was leading blockchain lab for Deutsche Telekom. I think we started 2017. So we've been the first incumbent blockchain lab worldwide. And we just got a chance to meet everyone here in Berlin, also globally. And this is where Staex was born. And then we bought it out with my co-founders. Exactly.
Oh.
Yes.
That's a really interesting story. So it started off as like a spin-off company, and then you bought it out.
So we started as a part of an R&D.
Okay.
Within the broader DT landscape, and you would normally set up the projects in R&D, which is like either you go the route of a startup, or you kind of create a new business unit within DT.
Yeah.
And so we knew with the blockchain, it was just so nascent and tokens, it won't become a DT unit. So it was kind of from the very beginning set up as a startup. And then we found German investors and bought the whole IP out because we decided as co-founders, also with the leadership of DT, that it's the best way to be independent, be fast on the market. And so, I think it's proven to be a good decision, years later.
That's great. So where did the name come from? Did the name also exist before you bought it out, like in the R&D phase, or how did this come about?
Yeah, so there was an internal name. We also had patents for this because I don't know, maybe it's like it came from a telecom culture, but we used to have this, longer names that meant something. And we wanted to help the industry to manage this Web3 craziness. So the first project was Mesh, and it was for managed ecosystem of super distributed hashes. And then, we went out to conferences and then we can't present it like this, right? And then it was just like a simple idea of like, okay, we actually stack things together. We help company to do the network, which is like the, natural stacking of things. And this is how Staex, just like a stack was born. And then, very simple, when we became a real startup, we actually went off and we first really bootstrapped it with my co-founders because we only found investors later. So we were super bootstrapped. And then, you go to register your website and Staex is taken. So that's how E came in.
So it's not like it stands for anything. It's not like an acronym.
It's not an acronym. It's just you just Staex.
You didn't even work on an acronym to try to
No. We kind of tried, but we were in this long process with Deutsche Telekom for 2 years to align everything. And name seemed to be okay, that's just, I like because it's simple. And of course, in the beginning, we took this, Nordic AE letter, which is or something in the culture. But then, our marketing department was no one can find you guys online. So then we just kind of re-decoded it into AE, and that's how Staex came together.
Interesting.
Exactly. Yes.
Have you, so like with some of the branding, did you use that Nordic letter at all, or?
So we used it in the very, very beginning.
Okay.
So there are like some old pictures and like logos with this like A, and then you have like, you know, the dot on top, but then it all went somewhere. Like just make it simple.
Yeah, I know. Okay, like a little bit before we like started recording, we were talking a little bit about the challenges with going into marketing as engineers. What are some of the challenges, like spinning off from being R&D and then going into an actual company? What are some of those preliminary challenges that you face with? So this is like a good example of like, marketing and getting it out. Was there anything else with outreach and getting your company out there and getting in front of people?
I mean, first I need to say it was, I mean, you can imagine we're all human, right? We were young. And so I worked for telecom for so many years in different departments, and you kind of get used to your corporate job, right? Yeah. And then we somehow naively thought it would continue because we already had customers as telecom, right? So we would just like say, you know, we're Staex, we are from the bigger corporate, right? Yeah. None of this was working. So they were like, you're whom, like, so what, right? And so I think this understanding of, okay, we need the branding, we need the name, and we need to work hard, because now it's great that we have this, you know, history and this pedigree, but we also have to prove ourselves. And so we actually spend, I would say, you know, like you, as a startup, you always have to be cost effective. So I think what we created out of this was actually really interesting. Because we got some funding from Berlin State to do the brand, and we actually use like Carl Jung archetypes to define, you know, who is Staex, and
interesting.
And actually the stories.
Talk a little bit more about that, 'cause I'm really curious.
You like it?
Yeah, no, this is really interesting.
So it's actually very, very simple in a way, because he defined 12 archetypes, and like everybody can use it for their own brand. And every archetype, like, you know, a hero or, you know, independent or, you know, some different archetype, the ruler, you can actually go and check how existing companies use it and how they really are in their archetype always with, you know, their communication, etc. And the archetypes are always connected to values. So you can go online, you can do the value test, and it's very funny. You just have to choose between different words very fast. So they bring you to your value. And we've done it for Staex, and I think for us it was very important that we are transformative for the industry, that we, you know, bring them the new tools from Web3 world. And this kind of being transformative, we connected to the natural forces of like, you know, sea and sand, and that's the colors that you find in our logo, which is, you know, the kind of deep blue ocean color, and then the sandy color, which is like the yellow. So yeah, I mean, you know, maybe we're gonna redo this in the future, but for now, I mean, it's been working really, really nice, and like just to have the story, you know, there is like a Mr. Staex archetype behind it. It was very innovative, you know, etc. And so that was really interesting process.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you think of these archetypes. So like one, like you think of it from the approach of like when you're answering these questions, you think of it as this is what my vision for the company represents, and then you answer the questions accordingly, or does it a little bit more personal than that? It's like, hey, this is how I feel.
So this is a good question, because my archetype is completely different. It also can be that it changes for you through life, because I also kind of was primarily I was the CTO of Staex, and then I took over the CEO role also. So you change here. And for Staex, you know, it was very important that we connected. The whole team was answering these questions. So it was we were not so big, so we could handle this process. And so the key people were also on the line, and we were collectively, you know, saying what is important for us. So I needed to, like, you know, and it's a good question, because everybody was trying to push themselves on this, you know, and we would be really careful, like, but it's more you know, it's not how Staex operates, right? So we would always have this, you know, kind of balance in the team.
Oh, this is an interesting dynamic. I think this is always like a dynamic you have to like figure out pretty early on, because a lot of it ends up shaping some of the company culture.
Exactly. We had an amazing coach that, you know, that would guide us through this process. I think, you know, us alone, we would just like be whatever, probably fighting. I don't know. And I'm actually happy with the result. Like, I would even stay with these colors because it, you know, it had so much meaning for us. And the initial logo actually also comes from some work that we've been doing in telecom. It's connected to Bauhaus. And these are the basic figures of Bauhaus that you see in our logo: triangle, circle, square.
Gosh, I should have grabbed your logo so I could like put it on, flash it on the screen while we're talking.
And so the idea of Bauhaus was to standardize and make like, certain like architecture more simple, that you have like more standardized housing. And that's kind of also the, foundation of Staex.
Standardization.
Exactly. For the industry.
Interesting. I also noticed, like, because I want to come back to this, but I also noticed that you have like your personality types, I think, on your profiles on the website.
Yes.
Is that related to like this Carl Jung or like archetypes that can use forward? Or
I'm not sure. I think that was a different moment in time when I don't remember whether it was me or somebody in the team that we were like, okay, that's actually really cool to do this test. And then we started joking, and then companies are making huge mistakes of like sending introverted people to conferences to sell. And we started like, and everybody got online and made this, and we started like, to have fun, like, oh, I always knew you're this,
Oh, you can tell when other people are one letter or the other, I think.
Yes, and then we just put it on the website, and it appeared like you should normally redo this actually, because it also changes. And I think for me, I have two, because I went through this like very like introverted CTO role, and I needed to push myself into the CEO position.
So you find that there's like a different one based on your role?
Yeah, like and I made it like, I think it was 2 years later. I'm like I have a different type now, so that was interesting. So whoever's listening to, I would recommend sometimes redo this, because
I also recommend it because I think it's very interesting. No, it's really funny. So my parents, whenever I was like a kid, they did this for some reason, and then they made all of us do it.
Oh wow!
And so like I've been like redoing the Myers-Briggs test probably 17 years of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it similar for you, or also?
It's actually like really different. So 17 years ago it was like super different. Obviously, I was a kid, and then I think pretty much like most of my adult life, it's been the same personality. But I noticed I took one with like my work brain and one like just normal, and I noticed that like my I kind of can become an E when I'm in work situations.
Oh wow!
Like I'm an INTJ, and so then it's like ENTJ sometimes when I'm like
okay,
and a manager, like as a manager, like
you have to be totally different.
You have to be a little extroverted.
We actually even met in the Web3 space. One of the investors, they would specifically ask for these profiles. They like
really,
they said like we would make the team go through this test, and we're like luckily enough we already had it. But it's interesting, like the first time when I actually seen something this, I think it's like super interesting, because they see the team dynamic. If they can, probably if they see the three type of the same, they're gonna be shift probably.
Because this is the thing. It's like with companies, as you're establishing yourself, it does like, I mean, investors, they invest in the team, especially at early stages, and so it's that's like they do want to see. I think
that's true.
I think that's so.
It's not my first company, so in my first company, I learned, because we were more friends coming together, and what I learned is that friends tend to be very similar, and then when they hire someone, they again find similar people. But for the good team, it's the opposite. Like you have to actually find people that are good in what you can do, and that's why a lot of friends get together actually don't work, because you're just too similar, and then you end up hiring the same people, and then like 25 same people on the team.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right, and so luckily enough for Staex, I was already was like very great experience, which was somewhat painful, but we learned from this to like really have not someone like, okay, I want to be friends with this person, but like what I really need in this specific point in time as a founder, and who gonna like you're one person away from your next achievement, and this is how like this team was assembled in a more natural way.
So maybe tell me a little bit about how the team is right now. So like you are two co-founders, or
so we are three co-founders now.
Okay.
Exactly. We were initially Philip and I. So Philip is doing finance, operations, tokens. I'm doing tech and execution, mostly product. And this is like the initial team. We were together inside Deutsche Telekom. And our luck was that Philip was coming from the CFO office, so he was working directly for the CFO of DT, and I was working directly for the CTO office. So that was, why we were actually able to get to this deal and actually, execute on the deal. Because I think we heard by now that we are very unique, that, not so many companies actually manage to get off so clean from a big company, because DT is not on our cap table. And then I think 1 year and a half into the process, we were part of some accelerator, and then we made a party, and then Paxi came. And I don't know, I just like seen her, and I talked to her for like 2 minutes, and I had immediately the feeling like I want to work with her. And we needed someone for partnerships and strategy, and she had, so much experience because she was working in the beginning of 2000 in Silicon Valley, and she was part of a very big IPO for $7.9 billion.
Wow.
And they were pioneering the mobile protocol, internet protocol for mobile devices. So she could also find herself in what Staex is doing with the, protocol for the industry. And I just, talked to Philip, and I'm like, listen, I really want to work with her. So can we please find some, some scheme how this can be done? And she got on board, and I'm super excited because she's super experienced, and for us, it's proven to be very hard to get someone with so much experience to be comfortable in a startup. So I'm super grateful she's on board. She's like traveling Berlin with her bike to different deals, and I just like this, kind of very down to earth, but super experienced, and super, I would say, very professional personality. So that's how we came together.
Oh, that's a really cool story.
Yeah.
I think it's always great to hear, like, when you know, like, I feel like that's like a saying. It's really cliche, but I think that it's totally a thing, because like you can vibe check pretty quickly if it's going to be a fit or not, or if you're going to be like working out. And I feel like it's also like one of the challenges. I know a lot of people face this challenge, like in the world in general, with finding the right co-founders. Like it can be really challenging to like find the right person, but a lot of times it is like, if you just have to trust your gut. Like if it doesn't feel like it's going to work, it probably isn't.
That's
and
true.
If it feels like it's going to be a really good match, it probably will be a good match.
That's true. I understand, right? As you say, for a lot of probably founders, it's a process, because I think also like to be able to trust your gut feeling, it's also a process in some way. Yeah, I mean, it's proven to be the best, because even if some, like, when we met, she was helping other startups as a mentor in German accelerator. So, I mean, my brain could have said, oh, she doesn't have time, why would she do this? But just, following this gut feeling, like, let's push it through. Let's maybe start with something small. And then it grew up in a very good, business friendship and, great relationship, great, fit for the team. And, like, she does things, I have no idea how she does it. Literally, it's so amazing to have it. We have like really, so Staex builds very complicated networks in a very complicated, like, public-private partnerships with the city, municipalities, a lot of industrial partners. And, I wouldn't be able to manage this madness. And I'm just like, and she just does it, and it's so beautiful to know that you do your part and then you can give it over, and, the other person in the team will just execute perfectly on it. So that's kind of really, really
dream
cool.
team,
right?
That's amazing. So let's get a little bit more into the product itself and what you're building, because this, I mean, it is super complicated and it's hard sometimes to explain. So, like, in the most general terms, how do you explain your product?
Right. So today, the last explanation, right?
Yeah.
So we say it's an industrial protocol that provides Web3 connectivity, right?
Yeah.
How we came to this, actually, because I was studying back in the days, 2017, a lot of protocols. And actually was also teaching crypto in one of the universities in Germany as a professor.
Wow.
Yeah. And
professor of crypto.
Exactly.
Dr. Alexandra, professor of crypto. Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you. It was, great experience, because you also get to explain a lot. And I would always say for my students, blockchain is a combination of things. It's a peer-to-peer protocol, because you need your networking in a blockchain stack. It's a chain, and then it's some sort of like wallet infrastructure that you need for your chain, right? You can define different ways of how you derive the keys, etc. And so, because we were bringing this into IoT world, we figured out that there was no peer-to-peer network that is optimized for an embedded device. Right, so the first test we started to do it's from like Leap peer-to-peer that Ethereum was using. It's Kademlia, and they have their own like routing on the network. So we just took this and optimized it the way we wanted, because we wanted to enable microservice architecture through this network for our customers. So there was a little bit of tweaking, because you cannot like make it out of the box with existing peer-to-peer protocols. And so essentially, Staex is a peer-to-peer protocol that gives every embedded device a very simple wallet. I guess it's just our knowledge from the industry, because typical blockchain wallets are very, they're human-oriented, so they have a lot of features, and there is a whole space of companies providing the wallets. And so now to build solutions for the IoT space, you need to like double down a lot, because it's like when you go to talk to IoT builders, the problems they have, with like voltage, temperature, platforms break, cables, it's so different. Like you don't need all these features. And so that's essentially what Staex is. It's just a wallet network that has very effective routing. Of course, it was built on Kademlia. So when we first went out and started selling it to our customers, we started measuring that we have a lot of overhead, because Kademlia has this like you have to ping all your neighbors to send a message.
There's a lot of overhead.
Exactly. And customers like, it would never work for IT. Yeah. So we rebuilt the whole stack. So now we have our own pancake routing. It resembles a lot the DNS, how it works today. And essentially, like also when I teach my students the networking theory, it's a little combination of like centralized and decentralized, because that's when you achieve the biggest scale. Yeah. And that's what we need for IoT. So I guess like this unique combination of our knowledge of IoT space, the network routing, the addressing schemes, how we use it in Staex, creates this very secure overlay for the companies that replaces for them VPN, TCP, some sort of Kubernetes, because we also can manage software through our platform.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and then they can, through this like service registration techniques that we have on the nodes itself, they can actually add on very simply. They can ping smart contracts out of this network. So for them, it's like two values. First and foremost, they get to manage the fleet. For instance, like one of the things, just to be very specific, when we started to build our first project that we actually built as part of DT, it was called Blockchain Scooter. We built it in Berlin and enabled multiple scooter providers that people can register with their own blockchain wallets and just ride the scooter right away without like going through KYC. It was really interesting. And there we learned that, on mobile network, the device always changes the IP address. It's done for security reasons, so they have dynamic IP addressing. And because of this, it's very hard for fleet operators to always maintain the permanent connection to the device. Now you can go and buy static IP addresses, but it costs more. So all of this like little things that we enable, like this permanent connection for them, which is bi-directional, et cetera, there is a lot of things that went from the industry perspective into our protocol. That's why we're not a blockchain, because I think there are so many blockchains that are doing amazing things. We are just doing the network.
Yeah, and I think this is a good model, because it's like then you're just enabling the capabilities where it's going to be the most useful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a process, because like first we sell the network, right? We say it's industrial network, it works at scale, it protects your devices against DDoS attacks, and all this, it automates your networking stack, etc. And then the customer trusts us, right? And you build this relationship with the customer. And then you come in and you say, there is this Solana, right? And they're like, what's that? There is this amazing protocol. They have, really great transaction throughput and very cheap transactions. So we can actually automate some of your processes. Like for instance, you can record CO2 consumption on an automate, and they're like, oh, this is interesting. And we say, and it's all enabled through Staex already, so you don't have to do a lot of things. And this is how we kind of sell also Web3 on top of our protocol.
Is this a challenge at all to sell Web3 on top of your protocol? It's just like we introduced the network, and then and so here's your Web3 option.
It's not they sell over, one conversation. I need to say though I cannot reveal the customer name. We just like, going doing our routes today in Berlin. And I think it's been 2 conversations that we were able to close. So that's like the fastest by now that we've done. The thing is, when we started in 2017, we did it the other way around because everybody was so excited about blockchain. So we went to sell blockchains into the industry. And this didn't work at all. I was very sad because, you get in and you're like, just, blockchain, so amazing use cases. And the industry's like, so what?
Yeah.
And that's how we learned that the actual problem for the industry, they were like, Alexandra, my network breaks all the time. Like my VPN, because, VPN has so much overhead. Which transactions? We're going to be losing transactions. Doesn't make sense to put them into the ledger. And this is how we actually came back and understood that the core of our, product, that was the network, actually should go first. And we need to solve their problems today so that they buy it. And then we can sell the blockchain. So this is kind of how the process was extremely frustrating, but you have to be honest in a startup, right? And understand what's working, what's not. And so now it's much easier because they see the value of security, of zero trust network, of how they can manage the fleet. And then we start with actually you can monetize your data. And the interesting fact is that we are coming back to the first model now. So the actual network is like cherry on top, but they are now more interested in these new revenue streams that we bring in them from Web3. So finally we're
full circle almost.
back into the future in that sense. Yeah.
Really interesting how that kind of all connects back together. And so then kind of going a little bit back to the product.
Sure.
There's a lot of really interesting things you said, so I don't even know where to start diving into it. So obviously it's like really important for, especially with connecting IoT devices, that you have like secure connections and you have reliable connections. What are some of what would you say are the more traditional solutions that people look to that wouldn't be Staex, and how do you do it better than them?
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, I think would be important to state here when I say VPN, of course, a lot of, people that would listen to podcasts, they would think about geo VPNs that we are using. So this, I don't mean this ones. Because we're actually in the market of industrial VPN solutions. And VPN has been created many years ago, last century, because, internet started off as an university project. Nobody thought there will be bad actors on this network, which happened, unfortunately. And that's why we needed to bring in all the VPNs and security on the internet. And so because it's an older technology, a lot of protocols that VPNs are using, TCP connection, etc., they were created through this industrial standards where back in the days, we didn't even have mobile connection. So you can imagine that it's not really optimized for, a charging station staying in the woods and it sometimes just don't get connection. So it's not an ideal environment. And so the biggest, companies we're looking into, it's called tail scale zero tier. These are the solutions that are used at the moment. These are more centralized solutions, and these are called zero trust networks. So there is this new trend in the industry. We are going from VPN to ZTNs, and they're called zero trust network. We learned it's a bad marketing term because when we sell it to the industry, they're like, zero trust, we don't want to talk with you because it's not secure.
So ZTN.
ZTN, exactly. But it essentially just means there is so much trust in the network that you don't have to care about all of security. And this is what Tailscale Zero Tier are doing. And so they just have more central infrastructure. I guess we have, not that I guess, but we have more optimization for the stack itself. We have written our code in Rust, which is memory safe language, so a lot of security consideration for this. And we're using this wallet structure that is our USP, that we actually can connect to different blockchains. So because zero-tier Tailscale mostly operate in Web2, so they're mostly serving the industry. And they also mostly serving the desktop use case. So they help companies for their employees to remotely connect. So for instance, when some of our customers, they have a drone fleet, they would use zero tier, their mobile data would go like this down. And this is what Staex is really optimizing for, the mobile data usage. Like for instance, if you compare us to some cloud services, because a cloud service would usually send some heartbeats. They would like check the device, are you still here? We don't do this. So we save a lot of just like meta traffic that cloud services are using. So this is like, what we're building. Of course, we cannot replace the whole Kubernetes today. However, I would still come back to this bigger vision, because I think you don't need all of these complicated features that a cloud would offer for an IoT installation. So some things like just like relaunch your software, update your software package sometimes is enough, because what we see in the industry, a lot of them just don't do updates. So this is like, the big difference, because it's low margin market and a little bit complicated on all these protocols, etc. So this is where we are at. Also, another like top solution for the industry, it's WireGuard. It's an open source VPN. We also been measuring against it again through the optimization. We are the best, for a mobile network. So as soon as we use WireGuard for charging stations where you have sometimes very bad connection, this is when Staex really does a great job through optimization. I mean, we're not magicians. If there's no connection, probably, we can't do much. But if there is like a 2G bad connection, we still can push something through just because of the...
So what is like setting up, let's say, because I am familiar with WireGuard and setting that up. So like, what does, say, setting Staex up look like compared to setting up a WireGuard network? So
WireGuard, you have to really have a good, good engineer that would understand how to provision the infrastructure, the network, how to build your clients, where you have your backend part, etc. Staex is just one client. So you just go onto your embedded platform, which is like, let's say, Raspberry Pi. You say like install the package, and Staex, it's called MCC from the old name Mesh Companion Component. And you just install this library, and then you provision your certificate for like your wallet, little wallet. Today it's all in software, but sometimes we partner with hardware companies to put the keys into more silicon. And then you install the second endpoint somewhere else, and here you have your tunnel. You always get the connection to your device.
And when you're adding in different endpoints into the network, the way you connect them is with their wallet address. You just keep adding that in.
Exactly. So this is the difference. My ultimate vision is actually we can replace IPv6 with Staex addresses. It's a longer shot, but just like when
the next, I mean, IPv6 is still like a long time coming. Everybody's using IPv4 still, I think. So,
and so in IPv6 you have the number, right? You have like your address number, or like IP. Let's take IP4, right? You have like whatever 192, etc. This is just a number, right? And in Staex network we use already, because we are Web3 protocol. You have a key as an address. You have like Staex, and then you have your public key. It's much simpler than in Bitcoin, so we don't do all the derivation and hashing a lot of times, just because the IoT device, it would be hard to do all these actions. So we simplify a lot, but still you have, if today everybody, like hackers can, open the IP address book and just like try to dial these devices.
Just ping, yeah.
Exactly, just pinging.
Are you open here?
Exactly,
Yes.
and all of them are open, right?
Yeah.
So we block it, and in Staex, because you have this randomly generated public key, it's not that easy anymore to actually, there are no numbers. And that's how, like, ideally, if when everybody's using Staex as a network protocol, then we also solve the problem of all these DDoS attacks for our infrastructure. So that's like the overall mission.
It does sound really challenging.
A lot of steps on the way, and a lot of people ask us, right, like, how do you do the standardization, etc. We actually, because I was working, luckily enough, throughout my PhD and part of the telecom work, I was leading W3C standardization group, and this is when I learned how the standards work also in ATSI. And I personally believe that now Web3 introduced a completely new way of standards. Everybody loves it. Everybody uses it. It is a standard. And I think the world is so fast changing. We don't have any more 10 years to create one standard and like, ask everyone and put all the use cases into the standard. And that's why we think, our market is connected devices. It's somewhat connected to manufacturing. That's Germany, right? It's a great country to be in to do this project. And we believe it will be just a tipping point when, the industry using it, everybody loves it. But then hopefully we're going to optimize it, to the best of our abilities.
Yeah. I think you can do it. I think you got this. Exactly. You definitely have this. Some interesting areas I do kind of want to like jump maybe step back to kind of like address is like these ideas of like hackers and like, because this is always a concern is like, hey, like, is my device going to be hacked? Is my like cameras in my house?
Yeah.
Will somebody in some random part of the world be able to like access this because the port's left open?
Right.
And they're just pinging and they're like, oh, now I can see into your camera. So what are exactly like are there any vulnerabilities in like the Staex network? Is it like, what are the biggest security concerns that you have when building this out?
So I mean, per se, because it's fully distributed, like literally every Staex agent is the same. You already have, I would say, like enough redundancy and distribution of the system that you are much more secure as any solution today. I think for us, the biggest thing is we do it today all in software. So actually, because Staex is a per se like a real zero trust network, we didn't do any compromise on this. You still have to provision every wallet for device, so either in manufacturing process or later on. So we have to solve the issue of remote provisioning, because if you wanted to provision the fleet at scale, of course you have a lot of security solutions today, but you still send your material over the network. And so here we actually want to look into zero knowledge proofs so that we can remotely start provisioning the devices. This is like the first area of where we're looking into. Second is the key is not in hardware, it's in software today. So this can be solved through how we do the partnerships with our partners. But it's not always the case, because not everybody goes for like a full-blown hardware security platform. It also depends on the use case, I guess. And then the third one is quantum stuff, because I mean, we kind of solved it because our interface to crypto is interchangeable. So we can say we start to work with a different library. But there was still a lot of optimization done around the encryption that we're using today, which is a normal encryption. And this is all hackable with quantum computers. So we definitely will have to look into this in the years to come.
Hopefully there's some time, but
yeah, and there are already like libraries on the market that you can use. So we just like, I guess, when it will be important for the industry, we just need to get testing. And we ourselves, the first rule of a cryptographer, never reinvent the wheel. So we have never created any like encryption ourselves. We just use standard techniques, standard libraries, etc. So for us, it's just like, we need to exchange it and adapt the system for the quantum crypto.
Interesting. Are there any risks, I guess, like on the user side of misconfiguring and then allowing for, say, somebody to spoof a device in the network or something? Is this?
So this we, over the time, so I was always giving the task to the team. It should be one line. Like you just say, I want to Staex myself into this address. And so this is exactly when we are doing a lot of optimization, because on a normal device, when you provision it yourself, you have to actually do all the certificates, firewalls, ports, etc. We automate it and block all the traffic by default, except for services that we allow in the certificate. And this already, I think it's a huge chunk of work that we're helping the industry to at least automate it, right? Because if you manually configure all this, even if you're like the best network engineer, things happen. You have to always manually, like on the internet, you have to always check for security, like IPsec, you have to, enable it. It's not like automatically enforced. And at least in Staex by design, there is like automated enforcement because every address on the network is the key. So by sending, you always have to encrypt.
And if somebody, let's say, changes the configuration, what does this look like? What does the process look like? Do they just update, say, hey, we have this updated certificate?
Exactly. So today we are running in a more centralized structure for the industry. There is like a CA server, certificate authority server, that is managing the certification. Today it runs on Telecom Cloud and with Staex. And this is exactly the part how we are building our on-chain CA. And this is how we prepare actually Staex to have a token, because of course it's kind of a copy of a DNS today, essentially. And this must be decentralized. And what is the best way to do this? As you know, to have governance as a DAO for the network. And so this is how it's set up today. So usually you would manage all this access rules and you know, as you said, redefine the setup and through this certificates.
This is kind of like where it is currently. So there's the centralized and decentralized aspects, and so you have to have some of these centralized aspects just because that's just
exactly
needed.
So when we started, we actually had some first systems of, it's called DPKI, distributed public key infrastructure, or you can also say DKMS, distributed key management system, which is more accurate. And so, but you know, when we started to sell to the industry, they were like, we don't need it. You know, we just have our PKI, we know this. And that's why we kind of pause this work. But now that it becomes more and more about, you know, how you can monetize the data, etc., that's why we are coming back to the initial research, how to actually set up a very robust DKMS where we can collectively on-chain actually manage all of this. You know, saying this particular drone has access to this, you know, house to land for this particular amount of time, and then not anymore. So all of this things, you know, must be managed by a community. That's the goal.
Interesting. So like right now, as you're building something towards like this decentralization,
right?
What are like, how do you get there?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I thought in my mind we're already there, 2017, right?
Yeah.
But then you learn no one needs it. I think how we started, we said, okay, it's very important for us that the network is distributed, right? That we're now using this centralized authority. It's like for now like this because the companies like it. We can connect to the existing system, but like in the future it will be, you know, DKMS. And then, so how we went about this? We built the first complex network for our customers. It was a project where we enabled drones to land next to tower stations.
Okay.
To create like drone corridors so that the tower stations can use this like the drones can use this like 2G to 5G tower infrastructure to fly like alongside this, you know, towers. And that's why Staex was needed, because you have a very high network complexity where the drone has to recognize the tower. There has to be like some kind of transaction for the landing and all that, you know, very complicated. So we built it. And that was the first moment when our customer was like, well, actually, I can work with multiple drone providers. I can just like, you know, push it as a tender on the network, and all of these drones can service my infrastructure or use my infrastructure for their logistic purposes. And this is how we came back to public Staex network. So we were extremely careful about launching something that no one needs. And the first time we actually got this feedback from the, you know, industry, like it's actually cool because when they're on Staex network, it's like a public network, but they're still hidden because of these addresses that no one knows. And they feel safe enough to get into this. And the network gives them enough monetization, new revenue, etc., that they're interested to be there. And that's how we got to the next stage of, okay, we need the public network. And now the central CA is a problem. So now this has to be decentralized. So we were really careful about after the first miserable experience, like no one needs the, you know, the central stuff. We were very careful to understand where the value is. Also, like for our first protocol, right? We started to sell it like it's distributed, and the companies were like, so what? And that's how we actually started measuring and seeing for the first time that our distributed structure consumes less data. We learned it just through this rough experience through the industry, because they were like, what is the value? Like distributed means what? What's in it for me? And that's why we started to do lots of tests. And so, and that's why I guess for us, it's always there is a value. And then we say, well, it only can be done in distributed way. So that's kind of how we go about it.
And so you had to do all the tests yourself to figure this out and be like, hey, look, we have done everything. This is what we're seeing. And
exactly.
Yes.
And I'm also thankful for this. I mean, first you're kind of, you're kind of sad because you're like, blockchain is so amazing. They just should buy it because it's distributed, right? But then you're like, okay, that's fair enough. They need the value. And I'm super excited that we've done this test and came to this, because even kind of my brain couldn't map that the distributed protocol will be more efficient. So that was even for us like, oh, wow, that's actually really interesting.
So in doing this, was there like any, I guess like, so you did it with the company. Is there any academic partnerships as well? Like, so because, we were coming out of a lot of academic partnerships, as our research lab here was working with a lot of chairs from Technical University of Berlin. We didn't do this in last year somehow, just because we're really working for the industry. We are planning on some now. And so producing some scientific literature to get out there.
Exactly.
Like, hey.
Exactly. Yeah. We're also like working on our token paper, because we think it's also important to show this to the community and see the feedback and run it through the research community.
Is it in stealth mode right now, or what can you talk about your token?
I mean, I don't probably wouldn't go into specifics because Philip knows it much better. I mean, essentially, we just copied the most successful business model on today's internet. You just sell certificates for devices to go online. And I think it has to absolutely change, because the older certification is just more, how to say, like, for instance, today it takes 2 years to change the ownership of the IP address.
It takes 2 years?
2 years.
Wow.
Exactly. I have an amazing company here. They taught me this. They are reselling IPv4 addresses and fighting with all this very old ICANN companies on the internet. And I think this says a lot about how the internet is built today. And I think it's a no-brainer to kind of think, oh, we're building this DePIN machine economy when we get insane amount of transactions, because you have to measure telemetry from these devices, make them autonomous, so you get tons of data from these devices, and that the older internet wouldn't work, because if I sell a device and I want to transfer ownership very fast, what should we do? Or I want to enable different services and they have accesses to different apps. It's completely not built into the infrastructure today. And so we said, let's build it you can run a node that is selling the certificates, which is built into the protocol, and you get rewards by doing so. And of course, there is some sort of staking, because the more stake you have in the protocol, the more you can, kind of have the power of the network. So it's actually super simple. I'm a fan of very simple things.
I think successful things are simple usually.
That's true. It's hard to get to this simplicity.
Yeah, it's hard to get to the simplicity. And that's why the thing is I think with a lot of systems, most of the time gets spent getting to the simplicity.
Exactly.
Making it easy, making it nice, because basically you get to all the creative flow or the design flow, the engineering flow. And then it's okay, we have this. Now we have to make it efficient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also think, I'm for almost 20 years in the industry, I think a lot about philosophy of security. And what I've seen is, the more complex your system is, the less you actually have control over it.
Yeah.
And the more hackers have control over it, because if you have no idea what is happening in your infrastructure, that's why I think the simpler it all gets, the more secure you can actually make it, as simple as it sounds.
Complexity brings vulnerability.
Exactly. You have a lot of multi-services and backups, etc., and then it becomes extremely complicated to actually build security around it.
Well, a lot of times in some of these systems, the weakest element is always the human element, and so it's also in complex security systems. Even if you minimize maybe the points of contact of a human, if you have enough of those points of contact, chances are somebody's going to screw up sometime.
Exactly.
And there's always somebody who's happy to take advantage of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And being on this security chair, one of the greatest learnings was to actually understand how organized hackers are.
Very organized.
And like crazy, they have better SLAs than services today on the on the normal internet. They are not sleeping. They have gains like none of us security engineers can imagine. Like from one attack, they get millions of dollars. So they're always one step ahead. So what can we do against this? And they're like massively reusing our IoT for their DDoS attacks against banks. And so that's crazy, and it will be only more and more. And then AI comes in and,
makes it even more crazy.
Exactly.
In lots of different ways, more than just kind of like more like the traditional like.
Yeah, and they already use it because, actually one of the also Staex ignition points was that telecom was hit by a Mirai attack in back in the days. And now what the hackers are doing, there is a next version of Mirai when they add AI, and connect it to the databases of vulnerabilities. So when the virus gets right,
gosh,
it's like a great system of AI that is like trying different backdoors to get into a device, right? And so crazy.
Well, and again, like the more you optimize that system, the easier it is. So it's like you have to make the defenses even better. Because like then also as like a defensive security person, you have to be one step ahead of the hackers who are doing this, because you have to discover the vulnerability before they discover the vulnerability and address that.
Exactly, and they're very fast. And I like if there isn't like infrastructure of a Mirai botnet on the internet. You just, everybody who's listening, just go and check. It's a very simple architecture. That's, and probably we have to learn from them. Like there are like 3 lines and like 4 servers, and that's it. And this is like what we are bringing heavily into Staex. By saying, we as a wallet run on a bus. So we sign the transaction directly on a bus and put it on chain. That's the shortest path you can have. Instead of building backends over backends and trying to push this transaction through like 10 servers, and then you have no idea what actually came to the chain. And so this simplicity and like, even if it's like 1 line bus blockchain, and, investors maybe want to, or like, people want to see more, but we don't have more because it's the simplest and the most secure.
You make a whole animated show about it.
Exactly.
Or like you show the complexity and then you just slash the complexity, like this is us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can draw the circles and squares.
We've got a drawing board. We can pull that over. And
but I think personally, the less you have it, the more secure, simple, cheaper your infrastructure gets.
Yeah. Well, and that's always, especially like operating a company, that's like ideal.
Exactly.
Because then you don't have to worry about too much overhead.
Yeah, that's true. And also working for bigger companies, they always say that your software system copies the structure of the company.
Right.
Also, like talking about Kubernetes, amazing system. However, a lot of people struggle with this because it somehow took over a lot of Google internal processes, and it's big beast that you have to know how to manage. And that's why probably a smaller company with less processes has a shot at it.
Yeah.
Just because of this simple structure.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So to move towards like wrapping up, what advice do you have for people who are starting companies in DePIN, people who are interested in DePIN? Yeah, people who are
I think,
wanting to learn more.
Right. Be very clear on B2C or B2B, on your strength. My strength is B2B. That's why we are building B2B software.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first kind of very clear mode that they have to understand. Second is to, I would say, to learn from the existing founders, and maybe get advice, because this is how they always, you can get to the next step and meet your first investor. And of course, testing, understanding, and especially there are a lot of DePINs now around data models to be very cautious on, because it's kind of easy to enable the measuring part. So you have like a lot of data that you gathered. I know that some companies struggle a lot with finding who can I sell it to now, which is also solvable. You just have to be very clear on this kind of flow of value that is happening. And then, you know, if it's B2C, keep engaging with the customer, so that, because I guess it's right now, right, Instagram society, everybody wants
attention economy.
Exactly, everybody wants the next big app. And so I remember there was like the Sweat app when we used to, remember, like walk and gain some tokens.
Yeah.
Now, like, I don't open it anymore. So you have to be like very clear on the value and long-term value for your customers. On the B2B, it's easier with the long-term value, because like once you are sold into, then they buy it in millions because they have big fleets. However, the deal until there takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So having a lot of patience, or I would advise how we have Paxi, a person from the industry with this particular experience, or the investors. This would help, and please don't get frustrated, because this is the game. You know, sometimes it takes.
The game is getting frustrated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we also you know, understood that we're now working with a lot of middle-sized companies, which are like, you know, much faster. This is the working industry in Germany, for instance. And so this is also like super exciting for us on the industrial front.
Interesting. Yeah. And so how can people follow Staex, find out more about Staex?
Right.
Where do they go?
So they can, like, if they need personal conversation, would be great. I'm into Sandy, like Interstellar, but like into Sandy on Telegram. They can go to staex.io on the internet. We also are on LinkedIn. We post a lot on X and LinkedIn. You can also go and test our software. Please do so, to send us some feedback. We're always happy to accommodate more feedback. You just go to our website and go to the product, and you know, you have 1 month to test. And yeah, I guess this is like all the channels we are present on.
Great. And so setting up a test, it's pretty easy. Like you could use just your laptop, probably.
Exactly. We support, like, you know, Linux and Linux-like systems.
Okay. So Mac OS is okay.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So you can just install a node in Mac OS. You can install it like a
WSL if you're on Windows.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's very simple.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for this podcast.
Yes. Thank you to Super Team, and I hope everybody has a good rest of their days.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.